My name is Eileen McRitchie, and today I'm going to be talking about the creation of the automobile for the common man and how it affected the American society. I'm going to break this down into three main groups of effects. First will be the economic effects, second will be the political effects, and lastly I'm going to explain the social effects that the car had on the lives of Americans. But first, here's some context. A common misconception that many people have is that Henry Ford created the first car. This is not true. Ford actually created the first affordable car for Americans. Before him, the technology had already been created by a company that is now called Mercedes. Ford created this affordable car in June of 1903, but his most popular car, the Model T, didn't start to gain popularity with Americans until 1914. In this time of the early 20th century, Americans were constantly progressing with technology, thus increasing the rate of consumerism. This also led to the first time Americans were experiencing the concept of free time. They didn't have to do nearly as much manual labor as they had to in the past, and many people were looking for ways to make their lives more enjoyable. That's a big reason why the affordable car was such a large milestone for Americans. People that didn't necessarily need the car still contributed to the sales. The first economic effect that I'm going to talk about is Ford's creation of the assembly line. He made this to increase efficiency in his workplace, and this sparked a reaction for many other factories at that time. More and more places began to use Ford's method, and we still use it today. First, we're going to look at a picture of a Ford assembly line and listen to an excerpt from The First Assembly Line, an essay by Henry Ford, written in 1913. The Ford car contains about 5,000 parts, that is counting screws, nuts, and all. In short, the result is this. By the aid of scientific study, one man is now able to do somewhat more than Ford did only a comparatively few years ago. That line established the efficiency of the method, and we now use it everywhere. The assembling of the motor, formerly done by one man, is now divided into 84 operations. Those men do the work that 3 times their number formerly did. So here so far we have laid out the picture and the excerpt that we just went over. The most important thing to know about the assembly line is just how much it impacted Americans. This creation increased the productivity of all factories that used it, and, as said before, we still use this method today, over 100 years later. The assembly line changed the way that factories worked, and will continue to work forever. The second economic effect that I'm going to talk about is how the creation of the car led to an extreme increase in jobs. As mentioned previously, the assembly line made it so there were many more workers that each had individual jobs, as opposed to only a few workers that had multiple jobs. This opened up many job opportunities because though Ford's car industry created the assembly line, many other places followed suit, and the overall unemployment rate in America went down. Along with more jobs in factories, the government also started hiring people to create roads, which was an effect of the creation of the car. You can see in this graph that just before 1920, the American unemployment rates dip. This was because of the creation of Ford's automobile. Going more into depth about the government roads that gave Americans jobs, I am now going to transition into the political effects of the automobile, specifically the creation of roads funded by the government. Because so many Americans began to invest in cars, the demand for smoother roads grew immensely. The government hired previously unemployed people to pave roads with cement. Though this was not the first time pavement roads were seen in the U.S., it was the first time that pavement roads were seen so frequently. It became crucial for American land to be filled with these cement roads because Ford's affordable car appeared more and more frequently in people's lives, and these roads simply became a necessity for the average American of that time. These roads led to the introduction of the road tax to Americans in 1920, and also to the eventual creation of the highway system in 1956. I'm now going to transition into the social effects of the creation of the common man's car. First off, I'm going to talk about the general increase of freedom that could be seen in Americans' lives. The ability of Americans to drive almost wherever they wanted gave them a sense of freedom that they simply just did not have before. For example, American families were now able to go on vacations where people who lived in the city could see the countryside and people who lived on the countryside could see the city. However, because so many Americans got cars at the same time and were learning to drive at the same time, there were huge traffic jams very frequently. The inexperienced driving combined with a limited amount of roads was not a recipe for success. Also, more people were dying in car accidents because the cars were not as safe as they are now, and once again, no one was really that good at driving. This led to the introduction of the driver's license, and that seemed to help solve these problems. This increase in freedom of Americans may have had those setbacks, but overall, it is what led to the lifestyle that we know today. Lastly, I'm going to talk about how the car affected the social lives of teenagers. Before the creation of the automobile, teenagers often had very restricted dating lives. They would frequently have to stay on their front porches for their dates because they had no way of going anywhere. After the car was created, they were able to actually go out for dates. This also caused an increase of casual sex among the younger generations in America. Parents were many times unhappy that their children were able to leave the house, and so the car also led to an increase of parental control over some teenagers. And that's all you need to know about Ford's automobile. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and learned something.